And Larry, that choice of music about memories leads a perfect segue into my message today. My message about faith and my message about fear. Because deep inside of us lies the memories that drives our fears and bears witness to the birth of our faith. So it could not have been a better choice of music. Thank you. The paradox of fear. You know, in the interest of adding some scholarship, if you would, to this message, because it is going to be a bit of an emotional one, so I hope you are ready for the ride. But in the interest, I did a little reading, finding different definitions of both fear and faith. Now, in Unity, we have a pat answer for how we define fear. It's called false evidence appearing real. Yeah, you want to close those?
Yeah, excuse us just for a minute.
That's perfect. Thank you. I was wondering about that earlier. Well, we use that phrase, false evidence appearing real. But I'm here to tell you, and I know most of you, hopefully, maybe not all of you, have had experiences where that evidence feels really darn real, and it ain't comfortable. And then there were all these other definitions of fear. And I came across something that I thought was so fascinating because it fit also the types of faith. And this was more about the types of fear. And there were three types: primal, rational, and irrational. Primal fear is what we inherited in our DNA from our hundreds of thousands of year-old ancestors when the world was a different place. And they had innate fear in order to survive, to not get bitten by a poisonous snake, to avoid the natural issues in life in a totally different world. And that fear, those memories of that fear are in all of us, that primal fear. But you know what? We have a primal faith. We have a primal faith in the beauty and promises of God. And each and every one of us is born with the right to feel and know the promises of God. And in my meditation, you know, we say the prayer of protection every Sunday. I hope you never say it again without feeling what you felt today, by the way, if you felt what I felt. But in that, those are the promises of God, and those are primal. They're in our DNA. Nobody can take that away from us. Can't be done. Now, we can close ourselves off from it, and we can get really good at that. Well, I can get exceptionally good at that, I have to tell you. But we don't have to. So we have that in our DNA, just like we have the memory of primal fear. And then let's go to the rational fear. What is that? Well, that's fear based on some knowledge we have. We are aware, we learn, hopefully, that it would not be very smart to walk out in the middle of traffic. So we are, by fear early on, we learn, don't walk out in traffic. That's a survival, it's a more modern day survival mechanism like primal fear was. And then there's the irrational fear. And I'm going to talk about rational and irrational faith in a moment, but there's the irrational fear. The irrational fear like phobias, or the things we get ourselves all twisted up about. You know, I'm used to moving around when I talk, and this is, I tell you what, I'll try not to scare you and tip over, but this is a little bit of a different adjustment for me, shall we say. But this irrational fear are things that we wrap our heads around or let get in and wrap us all up. And in one article I read, it pointed out that 90% of the things we worry about never come to transpire. It's only when we invest those fears that we experience them, the manifestation of them. And on the faith side, a rational faith is based on experience. It's based on, we built it up by accumulating information and knowledge. Like we come to have faith in the skills of someone because we've watched them do things and saw them be successful. Or we develop the faith in the skill set of doctors, and that has been prominent in my life the last 3 years. So that is a rational faith, and it's we come to believe in someone or something or some process. But I'm going to suggest to you there's an irrational faith. And interestingly enough, today, and I'll get back to it later, in this Release and Renew little booklet we have, today is walking out in faith. And this past week, on 2 consecutive days, it was releasing fear and the willingness to step into faith. But an irrational faith is what I call believing without evidence, without concrete physical evidence. I had, over the last 3 years, the need to reach the level of irrational faith because I was dealing with a very deep rational fear. On January 23rd of 2019, I was at University of Miami's hospital, and I was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer and with a complete blockage, and had to be taken into emergency surgery that day to prevent my colon from bursting. And if that surgery had not been successful, I wouldn't be here. It was that critical. Now, I did not know how critical it was going into the surgery. They had told my husband. I found that out later. But the point that what happened in that journey was when I found out the next day or two, I also knew I had a very long journey. But the fear started to kick in. The fear of what can I do? How can I get through this? Am I going to live? And it was a very, very pervasive fear. But then I started to remember our principles, our truth principles. And I started questioning, God, why has this happened to me, first of all? Why? And then I said, but even when I was questioning that, in the back of my mind, these principles were taking hold and saying, you do know why. You have to face it. And I will stand here and tell you categorically, I know exactly why I developed that cancer. For many, many years, I knew of this woman many years before who had that type of cancer. and the horrific journey she went through, and ultimately had succumbed to her cancer. And because I knew of so many of the gory details, and trust me, I'm not going to bring this up today. You don't want to know, and I hope you never have to know. I developed an irrational fear of, will I ever, of that particular, very specific cancer. And there was cancer. My mother had ovarian cancer. My sister had lymphoma. My sister-in-law died from ovarian cancer. I mean, there were a number of cancers in our family. But watching all those people go through that never shook me to the core like watching this woman go through that. And it is the day I understood why this cancer, I just fell in a heap on the floor in tears. But you know what? They were tears of gratitude. Because if I could understand the power of my own fear, then I could use it. That's where our unity teachings came to help me. And therein lies one of the paradox. There are more than one, but a paradox of fear. When you can face it, acknowledge it, and then proceed anyway, the scary gets less scary. The more you do the scary things, the less scary it gets. That was a deciding moment for me. Because without that realization, I don't think I would have had the strength to shift my focus to belief and faith. Because that devil would have still been haunting me. It still would have been rolling around in my head and dominating my thought processes, that I was going to experience all of these horrific things and then succumb anyway. But when I realized that, I was able to put it over here. Now, I'm not going to say it didn't have ugly little tentacles that came back every now and then and say, zing, got you today. Because there were some days it did. But what it did was profoundly enable me to build my strength. And one of the authors I read said, fear isn't all bad. Fear can become the fuel of action and progress. And that's exactly what that happened for me. And yet we think of fear only as bad, only as negative. But that's the paradox. And what a profound realization to know that, yeah, we can feel the fear and do it anyway. I think there was a book by that name. Now let's turn our focus to faith. So once you grasp that and you turn to faith, taking action every day to affirm that faith. And I'm not talking just about faith in God and faith in spiritual principle. I'm talking about where else do we place our faith. And a great gift our beautiful Catherine Duncan gave to me in all of this was I used to have a real difficulty with the Western medical model because I felt, even at the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, a fabulous place, I felt that the medical community had somehow let my mother down. And she made her transition long before I would ever have known to use those words for it. She passed away, and I felt she didn't have to. And I developed a tremendously bad attitude. Hey, I can tell you something. There's a great thing that you can use to your benefit or not, attitude's one of them. And sometimes you just got to have a bad attitude. But I'm not talking about that kind of bad attitude. I had a bad attitude that was not helpful. And I shunned a lot of Western medical. I really did, including procedures and preventive things that probably could have caught my cancer long before it had progressed to where it was. Because not only did I have complete colon blockage, I also developed a tumor on my right ovary that was, at the time they operated and took it out, was the size of a 15-week fetus. And it had also metastasized to my liver. And these were all facts I had to deal with. And somehow, that realization that day just threw the light switch. And so how do you go? What is the practice you develop? I decided I was going to totally focus my belief system on living and living well. So what I did, one of the things, the practices I started, yes, I did my meditation practices, and I know so many of you, I was on your prayer list, and I felt that energy. And again, that was significant in my being here today. But I also did little things day by day. I got up every day, once I recovered enough from the surgery to get up, I got up every day, and I got dressed nicely, like I was going out to the store or something. Now, I only went as far as my front porch, by the way, but I look cute. I'm absolutely sure I look cute, because I just wasn't going to live like a sick person. I got myself to where I woke up every day thinking about what I was going to do that day, instead of waking up every day with the drama of, oh my God, I have cancer. And I tell you what, cancer doesn't scare me anymore. It does not scare me anymore. Now, that doesn't mean it won't come back. It doesn't mean I might someday succumb to it. It simply means I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid, because God is there. And I allowed myself to experience that unbreakable bond. Now, we all have it, but if you don't allow yourself to experience it, it doesn't do for you what you need. But I get off subject a little bit, because the gift that Catherine Duncan gave me was she shared a comment that Reverend Evelyn said to her, because Catherine and I talked a lot when we both were going through this. And she had some words, trust me. But this was what she shared with me. She said, Marianne, as Reverend Evelyn's told me, God is in the doctors too. God comes through in the doctors. That changed my perspective totally. It gave me the ability to appreciate the Western medical model and what it offers to us, and to see the divine through that. That was a beautiful gift among many others that she gave me when we were going through this process. So I invite you to feel your fears, but find a way to put them down, even for a minute, and embrace faith, and step out and walk in faith. Because if you can do that, the fears will slowly ebb away. They will slowly ebb away, and they will not dominate your life. And when they come back for that pesky little visit, and they do, trust me, like I think it was Deborah Butler said in her talk a few weeks ago about those fears that sit on the bottom of your bed at night, and you wake up and you think, oh, I thought I had dealt with that, and it's back. Well, yeah, they come back. But each time that you reach for faith, and you set those fears aside, each time you weaken those particular fears. They get weaker and weaker and weaker to the point where you don't have them anymore. And I can sit here and tell you, I have no fear of cancer. None. Little c to me, because God is stronger, and my faith in God is stronger. And I've been given the gift of having faith in other fabulous people and places and services. So I invite you, as today's, now here's where it might get a little dicey. I invite you to your practice of faith and to step out in faith so that you may know, and this is actually walking in the oneness of faith, is today's lesson in this Release and Renew. And as Reverend Bronte Colbert says, when we walk in faith, no matter where we start, we will be blessed with a deep, resilient spiritual understanding. Our loving kindness will shine out and lead the way. And we will experience, and I think this is beautiful, the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Thank you. Amen.